The world of modern aviation is built on precision and predictability. We expect flights to depart, travel along defined routes, and arrive safely. The disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 shattered this fundamental expectation. On March 8, 2014, a Boeing 777-200ER, a robust and reliable aircraft, vanished. It was en route from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia to Beijing, China. On board were 227 passengers, including 5 young children and 12 crew members. Their journey into the night turned into one of the most perplexing aviation mysteries of our time. The aircraft simply ceased communications and disappeared from civilian radar screens, leaving behind a void of information and a world demanding answers. The initial hours and days were filled with confusion and disbelief. How could a large, modern jetliner just disappear without a trace? In an age of constant connectivity and sophisticated surveillance, the idea seemed almost impossible. Yet, this was the reality confronting authorities and the public. The aircraft, bearing the registration 9M-MRO, was not an old plane. It had a good safety record. The pilots were experienced. The weather along the initial part of the route was clear. There were no distress calls, no warnings of trouble, just an abrupt and unsettling silence that would soon trigger a search effort of unprecedented scale, spanning vast oceans and involving numerous countries. The mystery deepened as scraps of information began to emerge, painting a picture that was both complex and deeply disturbing. The plane did not simply fall out of the sky at its last known point of contact. Instead, data, some of it highly technical and initially not understood, suggested the aircraft continued to fly for several hours. Its path, however, was not towards its intended destination. It seemed to have turned back, flown over peninsular Malaysia, and then headed out over the vast, remote expanse of the southern Indian Ocean. This deviation was not communicated, not explained, and not understood. The enigma of MH370 captured global attention, not just for the tragic loss of life, but for the sheer inexplicability of the event. It challenged our understanding of air safety, surveillance capabilities, and the very nature of such an incident. Years have passed since that fateful night. Families continue to grieve, investigators continue to ponder, and the world continues to ask, what happened to Malaysia Airlines flight MH370? The search for answers has been long, arduous, and, for many, deeply unsatisfying, leaving the disappearance as a stark reminder of the unknown that can still exist in our highly technological world. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 began its journey like countless others. It was scheduled to depart from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:35 a.m. local time on Saturday, March 8, 2014. The aircraft, a Boeing 777-200ER, pushed back from the gate slightly late, at 12:42 a.m. Commanded by Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, an experienced pilot with over 18,000 flying hours, and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, who was transitioning to the 777 fleet, the flight was designated for Beijing Capital International Airport. The passenger list was diverse, with the majority being Chinese and Malaysian nationals but also including individuals from various other countries. The takeoff was smooth and uneventful. MH370 lifted off from runway 32R at 0042 and 5 seconds MYT. Air traffic control recordings indicate routine communications during the initial climb and departure phases. The aircraft followed its planned flight path heading northeast towards the Vietnamese coastline. The mood in the cockpit, as far as any recorded communication suggests, was normal. There were no indications of any technical issues with the aircraft, nor any unusual behavior from the crew. The first officer handled the initial radio calls, which is standard procedure for many airlines, allowing the captain to focus on piloting during the critical departure phase. As MH370 climbed to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, it maintained regular contact with Kuala Lumpur Air Traffic Control Center. The communications were brief and professional, consisting of standard acknowledgements and altitude reports. At 1:01 MYT, the crew reported that they had reached flight level 350. A few minutes later, at 1:08 MIT, they confirmed maintaining this altitude. These exchanges were perfectly ordinary, the kind that occur thousands of times a day in cockpits around the world. Nothing in these early interactions hinted at the extraordinary events that were about to unfold in the darkness. The flight continued on its programmed course across the Malaysian peninsula and out over the South China Sea. The next significant event was meant to be a handover of air traffic control responsibility. As MH370 approached the boundary between Malaysian and Vietnamese airspace, KLATCC instructed the crew to contact Ho Chi Minh Area Control Center. At 1:19 and 24 seconds MIT, a voice believed to be that of First Officer Farik Hamid responded with the now infamous phrase, "Good night, Malaysian 370." This was the last verbal communication received from the aircraft. It sounded calm, routine, and utterly unremarkable. Just moments after that final, calm sign-off, something critical happened. At approximately 1:21 MYT, as MH370 was about to enter Vietnamese airspace over the South China Sea, its transponder ceased transmitting. The transponder is a vital piece of avionics that automatically broadcasts the aircraft's identity, altitude, and position to secondary surveillance radar. Without it, the aircraft would no longer be clearly identifiable on air traffic controller screens. It would appear only as a primary radar blip, if at all, without altitude or identity information. This sudden silence of the transponder was the first concrete sign that something was seriously amiss aboard flight MH370. Simultaneously, or very close to this time, another crucial system, the Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, also stopped functioning. ACARS is a digital data link system used to transmit short messages, including automatic aircraft health updates, between the aircraft and ground stations. The last ACARS transmission from MH370 was sent at 1:07 MYT, reporting normal engine parameters. The next scheduled transmission, due around 1:37 MIT, never arrived. The combined loss of both the transponder and ACARS strongly suggested a deliberate act, as it is highly unusual for both systems to fail simultaneously due to a purely technical malfunction. When Ho Chi Minh ACC did not receive a call from MH370 as expected, they began attempts to contact the aircraft. These attempts were unsuccessful. They also queried Kuala Lumpur ACC, who confirmed they had handed over the flight. There was a period of growing concern and confusion as neither control center could establish communication or confirm the plane's location. Primary military radar data later reviewed indicated that an aircraft, believed to be MH370, made a sharp turn to the west, back across peninsular Malaysia, deviating significantly from its planned northeasterly route to Beijing. This turn was not announced to air traffic control. The aircraft then flew over northern Malaysia, near the border with Thailand, before heading out over the Strait of Malacca and towards the Andaman Sea. This new flight path took it far away from its intended destination and any commercial air routes. The fact that the plane continued to fly, apparently under controlled input after its communication systems were disabled, added another layer of complexity to the unfolding mystery. It was no longer just a missing plane, it was a plane that had been diverted by unknown means, for an unknown purpose, by an unknown party, disappearing into the vast emptiness of the ocean. While MH370 had vanished from civilian and most military radar, it was not entirely silent. Unknown to anyone on the ground at the time, the aircraft's satellite data unit continued to operate for several more hours. This SDU periodically attempted to log on to the Inmarsat satellite network. These attempts resulted in a series of brief electronic handshakes or pings between the aircraft and an Inmarsat geostationary satellite positioned over the Indian Ocean. These pings did not contain specific location data like GPS coordinates, but they carried crucial information about the timing and, importantly, the distance between the satellite and the aircraft. The Inmarsat data was a groundbreaking piece of evidence in the investigation. Initially, its significance was not fully understood. However, engineers at Inmarsat, through complex analysis of the burst timing offset, related to the time it took for signals to travel, and burst frequency offset, related to the Doppler effect caused by the aircraft's movement relative to the satellite, were able to determine two potential flight paths. These paths form two vast arcs, one stretching northwards over Asia, and the other stretching southwards into the remote southern Indian Ocean. The northern arc was quickly deemed less likely due to the presence of numerous countries with radar capabilities that would have detected the plane. This left the southern arc as the most probable final resting place for MH370. The analysis indicated that the final handshake with the Inmarsat satellite occurred at 8:19 MYT, nearly 7 hours after the last voice communication, and the transponder fell silent. A subsequent partial ping at 9:15 MIT was interpreted as the SDU powering down, likely due to fuel exhaustion and the subsequent loss of electrical power to the unit. This timeline suggested the aircraft had flown for an extended period, far beyond its intended range if it had stayed on course for Beijing, into one of the most remote and inhospitable oceanic regions on Earth. The use of this satellite data to define a search area was unprecedented. It involved innovative techniques and calculations, pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible with such limited information. However, it also meant that the search area was enormous, covering millions of square kilometers of deep turbulent ocean. The pings provided arcs of potential location at specific times, but not a precise endpoint. The exact flight path along that southern arc, the altitude and the speed of the aircraft in its final hours remained unknown, making the task of locating the wreckage incredibly challenging despite this technological breakthrough. Section 5. The official narrative, deliberate actions suspected. The official investigation into the disappearance of MH370, led by the Malaysian authorities with international participation, concluded that the available evidence pointed towards deliberate actions. The final report, released in July 2018 by the Malaysian ICO Annex 13 Safety Investigation Team, stated that the change in flight path was likely the result of manual inputs. The disabling of the transponder and ACARS systems, followed by the prolonged flight on a diverted course, was not consistent with a catastrophic mechanical failure or an uncontrolled flight scenario, such as one caused by a sudden decompression and hypoxia event affecting all on board. The investigation team meticulously examined the aircraft's maintenance records, the backgrounds of the crew and passengers, and the cargo manifest. They found no conclusive evidence of mechanical malfunction prior to departure that could explain the disappearance. Similarly, background checks on the passengers did not yield any information suggesting they were involved in hijacking the aircraft. The focus therefore often turned towards the flight crew, particularly Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, given his control of the aircraft. However, the official report stated that there was no evidence to suggest the pilots were anything but professional and competent, and no psychological evidence to indicate intent to divert the plane. Despite the conclusion of deliberate action, the investigators were unable to determine who was responsible or why. The report stated, the team is unable to determine the real cause for the disappearance of MH370. This lack of a definitive cause or perpetrator left many questions unanswered and fueled ongoing speculation. The official stance acknowledged the high probability of unlawful interference or pilot intervention, but without the wreckage and, critically, the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorder, piecing together the final moments and motivations proved impossible for the official team. The Malaysian government, while accepting the report's findings, emphasized that it did not mean the investigation was over. They remained open to credible new evidence that could lead to a resumption of the search or provide further clarity. The official narrative, therefore, is one of a deeply puzzling event, characterized by intentional deviation from the flight plan by an unknown person or persons for unknown reasons, leading the aircraft to a remote end in the southern Indian Ocean. This unsatisfying conclusion underscored the profound mystery that continued to surround the fate of the 239 souls on board. Section 6. Beyond Official Lines, A World of Theories. The lack of definitive answers from the official investigation created a vacuum that was quickly filled by a multitude of unofficial theories. These ranged from plausible scenarios, often supported by independent researchers and aviation experts, to highly speculative and sometimes outlandish claims. One of the most prominent unofficial theories centers on pilot suicide, specifically involving Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. Proponents of this theory point to flight simulator data recovered from his home, which included a route into the southern Indian Ocean similar to the one believed to have been flown by MH370, though the official report downplayed its significance. Another set of theories revolves around a hijacking scenario, but with variations. Some suggest a sophisticated hijacking by individuals who knew how to disable the communication systems and navigate the Boeing 777 without detection for an extended period. Others have proposed a ghost flight scenario where an event like a fire or rapid decompression incapacitated the crew and passengers, leaving the aircraft to fly on autopilot until it ran out of fuel. However, the deliberate turnback and subsequent navigation make a purely uncontrolled ghost flight less likely in the eyes of many analysts, who believe some form of controlled input was maintained for hours. The internet became a fertile ground for an explosion of other hypotheses. Remote hijacking or cyber hijacking, where the aircraft's controls were taken over externally through its electronic systems, gained some traction, although aviation security experts largely dismiss this as highly improbable for a Boeing 777 of that era. More extreme theories involved geopolitical intrigue, secret military actions, or even exotic technological interference. These ideas, while captivating to some, often lacked credible evidence and relied heavily on conjecture, moving far beyond the data-driven analysis that characterized the official search efforts and more reasoned independent investigations. The sheer volume and diversity of these unofficial theories highlight the profound human need for explanation in the face of such a baffling mystery. Amateur sleuths, aviation enthusiasts, and concerned citizens worldwide have pored over available data, satellite imagery, and news reports, hoping to find a clue that investigators might have missed. While some of these efforts have contributed valuable discussion and alternative perspectives, the vast majority remain unproven, adding layers of speculation to an already complex and emotionally charged event. The search for MH370 became not just a physical one but an intellectual one, fought out in forums and analyses across the globe. Section 7. The Global Search, an unprecedented hunt. The search for MH370 was one of the largest and most expensive aviation search operations in history. Initially, efforts were concentrated in the South China Sea and the Strait of Malacca, based on the last known civilian radar contact and early confusing reports. Dozens of ships and aircraft from multiple nations including Malaysia, Vietnam, China, Singapore, and the United States scoured these waters. However, as the Inmarsat satellite data emerged and was analyzed, it became clear that the aircraft had likely flown for many more hours, ending its journey in the vast, remote southern Indian Ocean, west of Australia. This shift dramatically changed the nature and scale of the search. The new search area was incredibly distant from land, characterized by extreme depths, often exceeding 4,000 to 6,000 meters, and notoriously rough seas. Australia took the lead in coordinating this phase of the underwater search, with significant contributions from Malaysia and China. Specialized deep-sea survey vessels equipped with sophisticated sonar equipment, autonomous underwater vehicles, and remotely operated vehicles were deployed. These tools painstakingly scanned the seabed, looking for any sign of wreckage in a meticulously defined but immense search zone. Over nearly 3 years, the surface and underwater search covered more than 120,000 square kilometers of the ocean floor. Despite this intensive effort, the main wreckage of MH370 was not found. The search was incredibly challenging due to the difficult terrain of the seabed, which included underwater volcanoes and deep trenches, as well as the adverse weather conditions. Several pieces of debris, later confirmed or highly likely to be from MH370, washed ashore on the coasts of African countries and islands in the western Indian Ocean, such as Mozambique, Tanzania, Reunion Island, and Mauritius. These finds, including a flaperon, provided physical proof that the aircraft had ended its flight in the Indian Ocean, broadly consistent with the satellite data. In January 2017, the governments of Malaysia, Australia, and China officially suspended the underwater search, stating that without credible new evidence leading to a specific location, the search would not resume. This decision was met with dismay by the families of those on board. Later, a private American company, Ocean Infinity, conducted a further no-find, no-fee search in early 2018, covering another vast area based on refined drift analysis and new data interpretations. Unfortunately, this extensive effort also failed to locate the main wreckage, leaving the precise final resting place of MH370 unknown. Section 8. Echoes of Loss, Aviation Scars, and Families' Pain. The disappearance of MH370 sent shockwaves through the global aviation industry, prompting a re-evaluation of several safety and tracking protocols. One immediate area of focus was aircraft tracking. The fact that a modern airliner could vanish for hours led to calls for improved real-time tracking capabilities. Regulatory bodies began to mandate longer battery life for underwater locator beacons on flight recorders, and explored systems that could transmit critical flight data in real time or in distress situations, reducing reliance on recovering physical black boxes from often inaccessible locations. The industry acknowledged the need to prevent a similar vanishing act from ever happening again. For the families of the 239 passengers and crew, the aftermath of MH370's disappearance has been an agonizing journey of uncertainty and profound grief. The lack of definitive answers, the shifting search areas, and the often conflicting information provided in the early days compounded their suffering. Many families felt frustrated and at times betrayed by the authorities and the airline, accusing them of a lack of transparency and insufficient effort. They formed support groups like Voice 370 to advocate for continued search efforts and to demand accountability, their lives forever marked by the unresolved loss of their loved ones. The emotional toll has been immense. Families have struggled to find closure without knowing the fate of those on board or the circumstances of their final moments. The declaration of the passengers as deceased, made for legal and administrative purposes, was a difficult step for many who still held on to a sliver of hope, however faint. The mystery surrounding the event has made the grieving process uniquely challenging, as speculation and theories continue to circulate, sometimes offering false hope or adding to the confusion and pain. Their quest for truth has been relentless, driven by love and the need for answers. The handling of the MH370 crisis also provided lessons for airlines and governments in crisis communication and family support. The need for timely, accurate, and compassionate communication with affected families was starkly highlighted. The aviation community has since worked to improve these aspects, recognizing that supporting the victims' families is as critical as the technical investigation itself. Yet, for the families of MH370, the deepest scar remains the unanswered question of why and where, a wound that only the discovery of the aircraft and its recorders might begin to heal. Section 9. The enduring mystery, still searching for answers. More than a decade has passed since Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 vanished from our skies, yet the core questions surrounding its disappearance remain stubbornly unanswered. What truly happened in the cockpit that night? Why did the aircraft deviate so dramatically from its intended course and fly silently for hours into one of the world's most remote oceanic regions? And, most critically for any hope of full understanding, where is the main wreckage of the Boeing 777, along with its crucial flight recorders? These questions continue to haunt the families, the investigators, and the aviation world. As of 2025, the official search remains suspended. However, the desire for answers has not faded. Private companies and independent researchers continue to analyze the existing data, sometimes proposing new search areas based on refined modeling of ocean currents, debris drift patterns, or reinterpretations of the satellite signals. There are periodic discussions about potentially resuming the search if new, credible evidence emerges that can pinpoint a more precise location. The Malaysian government has indicated its willingness to consider such proposals, offering a glimmer of hope to those who believe the aircraft can still be found. The mystery of MH370 has left an indelible mark. It serves as a stark reminder that despite our advanced technology, vulnerabilities persist. It has spurred important changes in aviation safety regarding aircraft tracking and the duration of flight recorder transmissions, aiming to ensure that such a disappearance is less likely in the future. The lessons learned extend beyond technical fixes, touching on international cooperation in search and rescue, and the critical importance of transparent communication during crises. The event has become a case study in crisis management and the profound impact of unresolved loss. Ultimately, the story of MH370 is one of profound human tragedy, wrapped in an almost unprecedented technical enigma. Until the aircraft is found and its black boxes are recovered, the full truth may never be known. The passengers and crew remain lost, not just to their families, but to a world that still struggles to comprehend how a modern jetliner could simply vanish into the night. The search for answers, whether through new technological breakthroughs, a lucky find, or renewed official efforts, continues in the hearts and minds of many, a testament to the enduring human spirit's need for closure and understanding.